Quiet on the set. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. I'm Dear Myrtle, your friend in genealogy. Welcome to Myrt's Book Club. We are studying Dr. Thomas W. Jones's Mastering Genealogical Documentation. And as you can see, I've been studying this particular book for a number of years. But what's different between a book club like ours is that we are just taking one chapter, one concept, and every other week picking another chapter, another single concept. And our focus or our goal is to push you toward buying the book, where you have much more information packed in each chapter, and also to consider taking a GenProof study group. One of the ones that Carrie Taplin and Cindy Ingalls does is a great alternative as well. Thank you for noticing right away that I forgot to click the option so that anyone with the link can have that link to our homework assignment. I'm going to pull up the homework, and old Myrt here is being opinionated. Let me introduce our panelists today. We have Melinda here with us, Maria and Ellen. Deneen is taking a little bit of time off. That's A-okay. It's a miracle when we actually get together and get our job done here. Let me pull up the homework. It's kind of, I actually submitted homework this time, as you can see. And I did it because I wanted to share this particular graphic that I have superimposed. It used to be sketched out with a magic marker, those of you who were witnessing the creation of this live. Chapter 7 is talking about creating either a proof statement, a proof summary, or a proof argument. And a proof statement's pretty cut and dry. Proof summary means you have a couple of things that you're correlating, and a proof argument means there was conflicting evidence. You might have had to use inference to arrive at a conclusion. But the most important thing I can tell you is that we are talking about a single research question. Let me turn off all those paragraphy things. A single research question. I remember the first time we went through Mastering Genealogical Proof, I had a wonderful gal who had an ancestor who was at Andersonville during the Civil War, which was a Confederate prison where her Union Civil War ancestor was incarcerated. And we've been there, and to imagine thousands of people in this, I mean, my yard here and house property is bigger than where these men were thrown together. But when it got to her part about proof argument or proof summary or proof statement, she gave me the whole bio of everything, who the guy's parents were, where he was born, what he liked doing, that he wasn't apprentice, but he worked with his father. It was not generic to the question that she was trying to determine. Was he actually that man, and was it her ancestor by that name that was at Andersonville, or was it somebody else by the same name? And she was able to prove it because she worked through who some of the other people were that were there, and they were names in common with his military unit. So that was basically the deciding factor. But when you're writing a proof statement, that written conclusion about one research question, was my guy at Andersonville, you don't include all the bio and carpentry and who the mama was, even though we're happy we know the mom's maiden name. I mean, that's his bio. This is not a bio. It's a written conclusion trying to get all your current thinking on paper. And I say that, of course, figuratively speaking. And that point in our homework, and I'm sorry I'm going first, but I am. Everything that a researcher may have concluded may be thrown out the window if new, compelling firsthand, and I say above reproach, evidence comes to light. It's what Cousin Russ called his current thinking. I always said if something turns the light bulb on, and he said the light bulb went off. We always had that discussion, he and I. Okay, so what I'd like to do is actually start with a PowerPoint to give you an example of a few things. This is our goal. This is the soundly reasoned, coherently written conclusion that's an element of the genealogical proof standard. Here we have one of my great-grandmothers, and I know you probably can't decipher that cryptic handwriting, but it literally says Louisa M. Froman, widow of William G. Froman, Company D, 3rd Missouri, and this stands for EMN, Enrolled Missouri Militia, and etc. Well, that's a statement. That's a proof statement. Doesn't have to be true. Mr. Bumgart, who's the one that wrote this on the back of this photo, was the attorney for this woman as she was trying to obtain her widow's pension after the soldier passed away. So it's still a proof statement, but a proof statement could be true or false. And if you knew about Louisa, you might wonder, because she's my ancestress that when her elderly husband, I think he was almost 70 and she was 14 or 15 when they got married. He would end up in the old soldiers' home from time to time from alcoholism, PTSD, I'm sure. And she lived with a series of other men whom she called William G. Froman. Oh, that pension file was thick. That's another story. Now, I know this is blurry because I took this picture of this plate up at the Daughters of Utah Pioneers, and this was through a glass, and then I've tried to zoom in on the identification card that went with these two plates. Now, it was apparently the upper plate is 8674. That's an artifact at the Daughters of Utah Pioneers. And it was donated by Nora Player Richardson, her granddaughter. Now, I knew my dad's Aunt Nora. And I knew her sister Mabel. And she was very exacting. And she likely knew her grandmother. And she's the one who donated it, and obviously must have said that it belonged to Betsy Oates Player, a pioneer of 1852. So it belonged to her grandmother. It's a statement about being a pioneer arriving in Utah in 1852. Again, that's just a proof statement. You need more information to make a proof summary to flesh out, yes, she was in a pioneer. They had many different wagon trains and hand carts that came from Missouri out to Utah, the Utah Territory. So you'd have to actually combine the plate story that granddaughters thought about her being a pioneer with the wagon train lists, which they did keep, and they are available. So that'd be more of a proof summary where it took a couple of things to get the point across. Now, here's my prime example that I'm proud of, and that is you go into our den in the back, and you will find that bearskin rug. This was taken at my dad's house before he died. And he had the bearskin rug on the wall, and next to it was this photograph of him having just shot the bear. And we ate everything he shot. And we were glad when it was when he would agree to have somebody take the ducks that he shot, because then we weren't clamping down on an errant piece of buckshot. But one of the things that I found when going through his papers after he passed away was this little yellow slip, which was the taxidermy receipt, where he paid about $250 and to have the bearskin rug made. That's pretty good provenance, makes it likely something that we could believe. And that would be a proof summary that he, in fact, shot the bear. Now, in Washington State, the bears are overrunning Olympic National Park. And so they have a lottery every year, and X number of bear can be taken, and bear jerky, bear steak, bear pot roast. Man, we had it all. Anyway, here's another item. Had I not shown you that? Yes, I had. I zoomed in. Okay, so now we're getting to the conundrum story. I had the first documentation I had of my grandma Frances, my mom's mom, was that funeral card. This is an excerpt from it, in memory of Frances I. McDonald, in the upper right. And I could easily explain away that in the family Bible, she's listed as Frances Irene Goring because that was her maiden name, Goring. Her people luckily came in 1848, so we're only shirt-tail relatives to a certain Nazi person. But the problem, if you read a little further, concerns the fact that the funeral card said she was born in 1908. I love that picture of Grandma Frances with her mama. And that Bible entry, and note this is an old Bible entry, it actually says Frances Irene Goring was born in 1905. Why the 3-year discrepancy? So you could logically explain it away that that she just misstated. My mother was the one that provided the information on her mother, and she was under stress, having just lost her mother. Well, that kind of makes sense that she could make a mistake. But being the due diligent researcher that I am, I compiled in my research process, not the written conclusion, that 1974 funeral card listed this possible birth date, family Bible, the 1905, the marriage license. Remember, well, you don't remember, but she kind of eloped when she married Mr. Froman. So you can explain away that she wanted to be a year older or younger, whatever. Subsequent census records showed it as being problematic. And then on the marriage return, when she married our step-grandpa, Mike McDonald, she said she was born in 1909. So we're really getting messy. And yet, in that research process, I was considering which is highly reliable and not so reliable. That these are things you're weighing back and forth as you're doing your research. Yeah. And so the birth certificate or christening record would be highly likely to be quite reliable. Family Bible entry, especially this one, it's kind of messy with all the different handwriting, ink changing, etc. There is no date of publication on that. Pretty reliable, etc. But what was most convincing is this. This is a delayed birth certificate from the 1930s when people were needing to sign up for a Social Security number in which to get, in order to keep working, because they were going to have to start paying into that newfangled thing called Social Security Fund. And it was signed by Barbara Dougherty, who was the doctor in waiting and knew personally of the fact and events pertaining to the date of birth of Frances Irene Goring. Well, she's a doctor. She likely looked at her record books to be able to come up with a statement like that for a delayed birth certificate. So now my research outline, or my summary of research, looks like this. There's that 1959 marriage return, where she married the grandpa I knew, our step-grandpa. It was in 1940 that the delivery doctor said she was born. Said when she was born. Now, it does help that I happen to have some inside information. This is me, our mom, my brother Mike, that's Grandma Frances, and our new Grandpa Mike and his twin brother. She doesn't look that much older than Grandpa Mike, but it made Grandma Frances concerned. She never told him that she was 3 years older, and she made my mother swear she would never divulge that information were she to pass away before her new husband. She did not want him to know about that. Okay, given all that, here's where we are in the homework. There's that same type of, record. And I frequently, when I have a conundrum like this, use Microsoft Excel to organize, when was the document created? What was the type of record? What is the information that pertains to the research question? When was she born? Yeah. So I have a proof statement, which is just that Frances Irene Goring was born August 22nd, 1905 in Chariton, Lucas County, Iowa. And if I were to insert a footnote, I would cite that delayed birth certificate signed by the doctor who delivered her. All right. Let's see what the community's saying, and then I'd like to hear from the panelists. Yep, loving the way we are learning and doing. Okay. Bear story. Proof statement might be that Hadley C. Hawk served in the Spanish-American War. And then you would add an end or a footnote with the citation, that simple document that told you directly. And let's see what else is coming in. Proof summary might be more like his military service records indicate he served in 1898, which was during the Spanish-American War. That could be tricky for this reason. Not all of the regular army in 1898 was involved in the Spanish-American War. There were still all the things going on in the West, right? in the western part of the United States. So he might not have been deployed on the forefront at a station concerning the Spanish-American War. Okay, we are going to talk about contributed data. Let me scroll back on the find a grave thing in my homework. Find a grave and billion graves can be reliable for what's on the tombstones, right? Not all that user contributed, they're related to so-and-so and married so-and-so, and here's the link to that person's tombstone. Yeah, it's entirely possible, in Valerie is suggesting that I cite the family Bible in my proof statement along with a delayed birth certificate. So I could have, yes, I could list two different citations in one footnote. That's entirely possible. Okay, panelists, what are you thinking about this? Am I on the right track? How did that correlate to the homework that you did? Maria?
I think it's, I like how you had all that information, but then you just kind of really simplified it down to one statement.
It's really hard to do that, isn't it?
Well, especially since you love, like, I love this information about this person. I love that information about this person, but you just need to keep it clear and straightforward. So I appreciate that.
So what if you just did the sentence and had the citations, the multiple citations down below to support it? You've seen statements in a compiled family history where there's 3 or 4 footnotes supporting one statement. Okay, Melinda, you're shaking your head yes.
Well, I think what you're saying about the statements are true, that, you know, and citing the different statements. I think where I would kind of disagree with you a little bit more is when you get into the spreadsheet and analyzing the different information on the spreadsheet and everything. That's going more towards a proof argument.
Well, in my case,
because that you're having to prove what those statements and the conclusion that you came to, that because you personally think there's more validity to the doctor's agreement in 1905, that then that should weigh that evidence more strongly. So therefore, that is an argument towards that fact.
Yes.
And so that's why it makes it a proof argument versus a proof statement or a proof summary. And I'll talk more about mine
when we get there.
My stuff.
All right. Ellen, what did you want to say about this?
I guess if I would have picked a different thing that I wrote about, a proof statement, I could have gotten right to the statement if I had said about where William Beaton was born. To me, I need a summary, and maybe it's just me needing to explain everything.
Yeah, and what I did not explain in that proof statement was all that conflicting evidence. You have to resolve conflicting evidence because other people are going to see that conflicting evidence and wonder, the first piece of evidence was wrong, even though it was a direct statement of a death date.
Right.
I have to resolve it. In fact, Dr. Jones says if we haven't resolved the conflicting evidence in our proof argument, then we aren't doing our job. So even though how could I put this? If I'd run across the delayed birth certificate first, that was pretty cut and dry.
Right.
But then, as other stuff, even though you've settled the issue in your mind, that's very reliable. A person acting in their normal job, keeping records, and now referring to those records to swear out a statement. In fact, that statement was notarized by an approved notary. So it wasn't just her opinion, it was the notary saying, I recognize this person is in fact the doctor in question. I do need to resolve that conflicting evidence in a proof argument.
For my grandfather on my dad's side, he has a delayed birth registration that I know is totally wrong. And I know from family lore that a lawyer told him this is what you need to put on that delayed registration. And it wasn't right. But
I know. This is why we have to weigh the evidence, etc. And if you don't tell that story in your proof argument, then it's never going to be known. We're trying to look as objectively as possible. So whether you find the most perfect document to begin with, or in my case, one that was way off, the last thing I got was the doctor's delayed certificate. I, in fact, had asked the county and then the state for her original birth certificate, and they said, oh, we don't have anything back in 19 whatever it was. And they didn't tell me, but there were delayed birth certificates issued that might cover. I mean, I was a baby, didn't know to even ask to see if they had delayed birth certificates. It was only when it came up on the list of new things, I guess I can't remember, Ancestry or Family Search, I thought, my gosh, that's Iowa. It's the right county. Let me go see. And I found it right away. So Betty Lou is saying, so proof statements are kind of at the beginning of the research process before an exhaustive search is complete. True. And it's not just 3 items that prove a point. Elizabeth Sean Mills says, how many? Not just 3. Somebody's saying that 3 is what you need to do, but anyway. Okay. So let's switch and go to somebody else's homework. I really wondered how you all would react to that. And Melinda, each one of us have learned from just that crazy example of my grandmother, who was a bit egotistical about her birth year. He would not have cared at all. So I would need to use this space here to compose a clearly written conclusion. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end in a proof argument. And that middle part is quite large. And the beginning states what you believe to be true. And the end reiterates that. And the in-between is the messy part that can be a couple of paragraphs in the way of a proof argument. Okay, I can't remember whose homework's next. Okay, Ellen's. So, Ellen, let's have you talk about this.
So my proof summary was about who is William Beaton's parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I should have maybe picked something a little bit easier.
Okay. Yeah, because you have trouble with this guy.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, initially when I first started, my family lore was that William was raised by his father, but that the lady that was William Beaton Sr.'s wife was not his mother.
Mm-hmm.
So it went through all that. so I DNA tested people that were descendants of William Beaton Sr. and Mary Jane Rasbach, and I tested several people, and that's how I discovered that no, I was the odd person out. We were not Beatons. And so I've tested everybody in my family, all my mother's siblings, and if not her siblings, then their children, and no one matched anybody in the Beaton family.
Period. Yeah. Just nobody.
Yeah. So then of course, along the way, you find the, like William Beaton is my most difficult ancestor.
Yeah.
And anyway, so in his obituary, it mentions that.
I think that's here.
Yeah, that he was survived by Mrs. W.L. Davis, and so then even that became a challenge to find out who was Mrs. W.L. Davis. And it was then that I realized that that was Annie Batten, and that she was in fact adopted. And because I wondered how can they be Beaton and Batten, and I found out that she was adopted, and that's basically how I discovered that my great grandfather was adopted. And then you go to somebody in the family and say, "Did you know that he was adopted?" And they'll say, "Oh yeah, but they never told me that."
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's like one of my fellow students. I was a student in a genealogy class, just as a way newbie beginner, and we'd all been counseled to speak to our oldest family members and find out what they knew. And she had been already doing that with a friend that lived, this was in Maryland, and that person lived on the Eastern Shore, the older relative. And, she asked her again, can I come out and talk to you about the family? Maybe you've got a photo or something. And she said, no, I just have a family Bible. It's got names and dates in it. But for years, she hadn't given her any news, any information. So I hear you. Okay.
So then I started working with the DNA. And so I have what I call an in common with tree. And it's people that are in common with my family that I know go back to this mystery. And so I know that, we descend from James Parker and Elizabeth Toner, and I know, and follow down until I got to a point where I knew that it had to be a combination of, and I should have mentioned also that when I found Mrs. W.L. Davis, I did find a descendant of her, and I DNA tested, and she was a match to our family. So it made total sense, right?
Okay.
Oh,
well,
good. I'm not on the homework.
Yeah. All right, let me pull up the right file here.
Okay.
And sorry.
So then then I just started DNA testing and came to the conclusion that I'm looking for a Bayless marrying a Walden. Or at least finding that couple.
Yes.
And that's when I found Walter and Eliza.
All right, so I have a suggestion.
Okay.
This is still a write-up, like a research report.
I know. I wasn't. I was a little bit unclear about what I should have actually.
And but I think this is very valuable because you clearly spent a lot of time looking at the DNA matches and mapping it out for yourself, so that you could understand who belongs and who doesn't.
Right.
I'm trying to find a suggestion from Elizabeth Schoen Mills. She writes research reports to herself, like a DNA research report, which you've got here, or the transcription and analysis of what this is as far as that obituary and then the subsequent work you found about who Mrs. W.L. Davis was. And but she has an actual form that she uses when she does her research reports.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to pull this up and share this link with everybody. Now, Historic Pathways is her research articles and sample reports that give us models for how to compose these things. So there's genealogical reports like a preliminary summary, the research notes, which is basically what you've given me. And let's find a proof argument. Parentage, research notes. I'm not finding it labeled that way. Let's see, she calls it a research report, but what was it?
I saw something, I thought.
Let's do the Control F for the fabulous find. Okay, let's find report. Research notes, proof arguments. Okay, so she supposedly has a proof argument here. Proof argument here. Okay, view. Now let's look at it. And I'm going to zoom in. See how she uses her own letterhead and she sends it to herself.
Mm-hmm.
Go away. Okay. Okay, December 2022. I don't know what this is. Oh, go away, AI assistant. Okay. And then here's what she knows. And she's not including documents here, but there are citations as footnotes for that page. And it can get quite detailed. But the actual images are not showing up.
Okay.
And that may help make it more concise.
Right.
Like there's a find a grave entry. And then here is an interesting footnote that isn't just a citation. Let me zoom out a little, where it says, left without benefit of title a second tract of land which they sold, etc. And then there's the citation of it being in Polk County Deed Book 7, pages 272 through 274 through 75. And maybe if we looked at it, I mean, Dr. Jones is telling us to do this, but maybe if we actually see a sample like this, it may help us be more concise. So she sent it to herself, and that, in other words, it went to her file. You see her heading there?
Yeah.
And but her research notes are different. So where it has the census record extracted and birthplace not stated, it has the image with it. That's elsewhere in this listing.
Right.
So when it comes to the part where you're actually doing a proof argument, we're not including all those cutesy graphics like I did or that you did.
Yeah, right.
It's okay. Think of it also this way. It costs, I don't know how to put this. I don't think that's a good argument for me to pose at this point. I just think we could actually spend a ton of time someday going through some of her report examples.
Right. I mean, because that's kind of what I was thinking I wanted to do when I started working on this. And I apologize because I thought I was going to do this earlier and it wasn't. And
Well,
so
no.
I was looking for an example because I really didn't know what it should look like.
Okay, so what if you want to say something, Melinda? You muted yourself.
I just want.
Oops, I muted you back.
Oh, sorry. I just want to go back to the chapter. Yes, it's about proof statements, proof statement, proof summary. It's Maria and I were talking about this. It's about how you want to write your conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything doesn't have to be laid out in an argumentative way. And I think all of us, I don't know about Maria, but Ellen seemed to be struggling with this. I was struggling with this and came up with something radically different as to how to show this with our own work.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I was working under the impression I didn't want to do a proof argument.
Mm-hmm.
So,
All right. We're going to get.
you have to
Yeah, we're
step
gonna
back. And yeah, I agree. Looking at Elizabeth's stuff's informative, but it's up to the author to decide.
Well, this is true. If you know that, I mean, I perfectly am convinced in your case, Melinda, where you've got three women by the same name, you clearly have identified them as distinct individuals. It makes sense, and you included documents, as has Ellen. There's a lot to be thought, a lot of work and thought that needs to be put into chapter 7. And it's really hard to just pick one little item without going into great detail about everything he said, which I cannot do in this open recorded format. Yeah, let's see. Maria, you said something about considering your audience. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, I think that like if I were to send somebody that's very educated in genealogy, they would want more detail. And they might want the conflicting evidence. If I'm talking to my husband, he's just going to want a statement that says, this is when this person born. He doesn't want to know all the other stuff, and he won't care. So I think depending on who your audience is, you can write a proof summary, you can do a proof argument, or you can just make a statement. So I think it depends on your audience, how you're going to write it.
Interesting.
That's what I'm thinking. But yeah.
All right. Well, let's get back to our actual homework.
Excellent.
And thank you, Ellen, for your part in it. And you don't need to apologize, because all of this brings on a good discussion. You know, even what I initially said was a proof statement, you all realized, yeah, it needs to be a proof argument, and I need to resolve that conflicting evidence. Okay, sharing screen again. And these are beautiful write-ups that people like us, crazy genealogists, would enjoy reading.
Well, I realize that I need to make something like this because otherwise none of my family will ever know how I ever came to any conclusions.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, Maria, you managed to get yours on one page. And then you just said to me, when it was just you and I in the green room, you were apologizing. And I said, I have to try to drink my protein drink so I can breathe. And I'm actually feeling better. So I didn't quite understand what you were saying. So talk to me about your homework.
So I could have rewritten this homework that I did for my ProGen homework.
Yes.
And it could have been really fancy. But what I wanted to say is how I failed at writing an argument. And I did this homework for my ProGen on this particular, on Herman. And I just laid it out completely crazy. It just did not look good. But okay, so the first part is I love it when there's documents, and I get really upset when people don't cite information. But if I was guilty of citing too much information that didn't make sense, so what I,
Like it didn't apply?
well, no, it didn't apply. It just wasn't organized well.
Oh,
So what I quote from Dr. Jones is that proof exists, however, only in the writing. So if you don't write clearly, the proof's not going to be there. And the way I had written my paper, I had started out with citing birth records and other kind of records. And anybody reading my proof would say, well, why?
what are you proving?
What's the question? And I mean,
Mm.
I read the question, but it didn't really make sense. And so I could have just made it a lot clearer instead of trying to be really fancy, showing a lot of different records.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't. So I've improved, and I think practicing, starting doing this stuff is the way that we learn.
Well, one of the things that I mentioned during Mondays with Myrt is that Dr. Jones had taught us not to use the word "I did this." It gave us a few steps back from the question at hand, looking at all the information items from various documents, hopefully that have actual unique sources. Not that a death certificate about parents and an obituary that mentions parents, that's probably provided by the same person. So it's not, so those two don't, unless it's the parent, may not carry as much weight as the birth certificate that lists the parents, which we do wish Ellen someday could possibly find. Because that would be easy. And wouldn't it be terrible to just collapse all this down and only refer to that and not talk about all the other challenges you've had? So that's really your job in writing this homework for your ProGen was to critique your own work. And that's why the name I keeps showing up here, the subject I.
Well, not in my homework, I did not use I, but the way I organized the information
Okay.
in that homework was not streamlined. So I was all over the place because I found so many records, and I did so many different charts. People you could get lost in information.
They got lost in the weeds.
Yeah. So,
well, and we want people to begin to relate to these things, whether they're experienced researchers or not. We want the ones that are not researchers to realize who their ancestors really were, but we don't want to overwhelm them by our saying, look at all this work I did, even though we did all this work. Probably only your dearest friends and really close genealogy buddies will understand this much of all the work you went through to arrive at these conclusions. It's really between you and that ancestor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Couple of other things. So Valerie's saying her proof argument is 4 pages. Some of mine for one of her books was a 10-page argument due to all the research. So one of the things that I'm asking you, Valerie, were you good at stating the research question and what the answer was at the beginning and then restating it at the end and then carefully, tiptoeing through the tulips with us? Is that how you did that? So that you take something complicated and make it make sense. I don't know. All right. Your poor husband gets exactly what I write in a proof argument given to colleagues, articles, teaching your students. Yeah, it can overwhelm them. That's why I was smart and married Mr. Myrt, who is a genealogist. Yeah.
But I do like practicing, and I had so much fun doing the research, but now I know to keep it a lot more organized. And like you said, be clear in the question at the first. Tell them what you're looking for, and then tell them again what you found, kind of thing.
At the end.
Yeah.
Mr. Myrt said that when he would prepare reports, and tell me if I'm wrong, hon, he's out there listening, should I get dizzy again. He would, at the beginning, tell him what he's going to tell him. Then he'd tell him, and then at the end, he'd tell him what he told him.
Exactly.
Is that about right, sweetie?
Yeah.
He says yes. I got it. See, I do listen to you, honey.
I'm glad I'm sitting down.
Did you hear him say that?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. But I want to caution Karen. We're not writing a vignette of an ancestor. It's not a vignette or a profile of the whole bio thing. It's one research conundrum, one element of his profile that we're talking about right now. So for that particular book, yes, she did it as Mr. Myrt would do it. But for her first book during her baby stage of genealogy, not so much. I think that we're all on a continuum in one regard or another. So Betty Lou summarized your contribution that our homework helps us remember to be organized in our presentation.
Yep. That's exactly what I'm saying.
This is an interesting way that Valerie connected with the non-genealogists in her family. After that first book, she did quarterly newsletters to correct any confusing paragraphs done in the first book. Intriguing. Okay. Well, thank you. And explaining double S's and stuff like that are things we need to do in considering our audience and how something could be indexed inaccurately. Okay, Melinda, you're on the hot seat, kiddo.
Okay.
And I highlighted a few, just the names.
I'm having a hard time seeing the actual work, but I can
Okay,
get that. Thank you. Okay. I don't know if you saw that I put a statement up at the top that said what the chapter was about and that I was going to be doing a summary.
yes.
And I probably should have put the summary up at the top and then put all the stuff I did. But I went about it in putting out the question first, which was my grandfather's oral history, and that's Smahall, that there were 3 Barbaras in his family.
Yes.
And so I just went in to prove who these Barbaras were. 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, so there's one.
1,
Here's the other one.
2,
Oh, no, that's one that passed away. Here's the
2,
second one. And
the 3.
okay. Okay. And then
I just showed a document that had all 3 of them in, but that's my summary.
okay. So yes, the 3 different entries.
Yeah.
One was a student, one worked in a lab, and this one is the wife of Thomas. Okay.
Yes.
And so you only missed basically one element. You told us what you're going to do, though, and I had failed to highlight it. Close your eyes, guys. This is enough to make anybody dizzy. Okay, there's Maria. Well, you get it. Those are the elements that I was looking for. I got right off the bat the statement about the 3 women by the same name.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that you showed each one in the context of the family. So we knew that we were, I mean, I don't know how how common that surname is.
Not very.
Okay. But so imagine that it was Smith, you
Right.
know, and you clearly, because you put them in the context of a family, we knew we were talking about the right Smith family or Schmehal.
Smehal.
Schmehal. Okay. I thought that this was good. I mean, I thought each bit of homework that you all submitted was good.
Now, can I share what I did discover in doing this homework?
You bet.
Which was fun. Was using AI on that Czechoslovakian record. I was able to discover the maternal grandparents. I had the Smehals, but I found the Vidasskis are in that record. And previously, I had who I consider the best Czech genealogists in the U.S. helping me previously, and neither one of us picked up on it. So I've got another full line of Czech ancestors back there, and that made the day.
That does make the day. Yeah. Very cool. Betty Lou has an interesting perspective too. Remember, she does Italian research. Mm-hmm. Need to remember, an uncommon name in the U.S. does not mean it's uncommon in the native country.
It's uncommon in Czechoslovakian too, because we've worked years on it by ourselves, not being experts, and then with the expert, she had to figure out that SMAIHALL is actually ZMRHAL. Don't know how they get that, but when you listen to them phonetically, they sound exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. It's a soundexy kind of thing, isn't it?
And what's interesting is because of that, I was able to connect with this would have been my second great grandfather's brother's families that also immigrated into the U.S. But that was over 50 years worth of trying.
Do you remember which AI?
Yeah, ChatGPT.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. So even though we were each rushed, out of breath, barely recovered from moving, we have the same doorknob handles on your cupboards, Maria, as we have on our doors. Not in the kitchen though. Right. Yeah, even though we've all had thought that your homework was not wonderful, each one of you apologized to me separately or collectively. It was a good discussion. It was wonderful. I couldn't do this on my own. I had to tell the story of we take that chart and then make a narrative out of it. We take that Google sheet or that Excel worksheet and make a paragraph or 2 or 3 or 4 out of it. I only made one sentence. And yeah, you see the difference between a proof summary of one document or a proof statement. Proof summary is more than one. And a proof argument, which I need to compose so that all of that comes to the attention of anyone who's doing research on that particular woman. And to have, I know she only had my mom, just one child. So it's really my family, my daughters, but also my brother who doesn't care about genealogy, one of his daughters might like it, or his brother Morgan might. You never know. You never know. They're at different stages in their life, having children, excelling in their work life experience. And we have a different focus when we have more time to be able to do this kind of research. Thank you, ladies, so much. What a great discussion today. I'm going to go rest and think on how I'm going to correlate that information on that conflicts with the birth date of my ancestor. Appreciate your help with my homework. Okay, folks, nothing left to say, but I'm Dear Myrtle, your not so retired friend in genealogy. Happy family tree climbing, everybody. That's a wrap.